silent war happening inside you every single day. A war between your higher self and your conditioned mind. A war between what you know you are capable of and what your brain tells you is too hard, too risky, too uncertain. War cannot be seen. It leaves no physical scars, but it determines everything: your decisions, your reactions, your energy, your future. Most people don't even realize this war is taking place. They wake up and immediately fall into patterns. Same thoughts, same emotions, same reactions. They believe they are in control, but they are not. They are being lived by their brain, pulled by unconscious impulses, steered by past experiences, moved by whatever emotion happens to arise. And they call this life. But there is another way to live. One that does not begin with information, but with awareness. One that does not require brilliance, but discipline. Because to control your brain is not about domination. It is about understanding. You cannot lead something you don't listen to. And you cannot silence something you haven't studied. So the first question is simple: are you in control of your brain? Or is it in control of you? Your brain is a tool, powerful, complex, capable of incredible things. Like any powerful tool, it is dangerous if left untrained. The brain does not care about your goals. It cares about survival. It does not seek greatness. It seeks comfort. It is not designed to make you fulfilled. Designed to keep you from risk, from change, from the unknown. This is why every time you try to step forward, your brain pulls you back. But understand this: your brain is not your enemy. It is your servant. Only when you train it, only when you take the time to observe it, to guide it, and to interrupt its automatic loops. Otherwise, it will run your life based on the past, not on possibility. To begin training the brain, you must first stop reacting to it. Just because a thought appears does not mean it is true. Just because a feeling arises does not mean it must be obeyed. Your brain will speak loudly and often. But you are not the voice. You are the one listening. This separation is the beginning of control. Start by observing the patterns. How does your brain respond when something unexpected happens? When you're under pressure? When you're bored? Moments are your training ground. Watch how quickly it searches for distraction. Watch how easily it creates stories of fear or resistance. Watch how it avoids discomfort every single time. Now you begin the real work, choosing something different. When the brain says stop, you breathe. When it says this is too hard, you move forward anyway. When it says let's take the easy way, you pause and ask, is this the path of strength or of safety? You don't silence the brain, you challenge it. And over time it learns. Just like a muscle trained under resistance, the brain changes with repetition. Not through intensity, but through consistency. Every time you observe instead of react, you weaken the old pattern. Every time you act from awareness instead of emotion, you rewire the connection. This is not philosophy. It is biology. But it must be lived to be understood. You also learn to speak to your brain not as a victim of it, but as its master. You give it commands. You direct its focus. You set its rhythm. You choose the thoughts you feed it. Because every thought, every image, every word you repeat becomes instruction. Your brain does not care whether the command is helpful or harmful. It will follow what you repeat. So train it carefully. And remember this: you do not need to control your brain perfectly. You need only to control it consciously, to choose when to listen, when to challenge, when to rest, when to act. The brain will never stop speaking, but you don't have to follow every word. You can pause, you can breathe, you can lead. Controlling the brain is not about suppressing it. It is about organizing it, strengthening it, refining it, turning it from a restless machine into a disciplined servant. And that shift changes everything, because now your thoughts are no longer obstacles, they are tools. Your emotions are no longer rulers, they are signals. Your mind becomes your ally. That is when your life begins to move in alignment, not with habit, but with intention. So ask yourself once more who is in control right now, your training or your default. And know this: the brain will follow whatever you prove to it, not what you promise. Train it, use it, lead it, and it will take you further than motivation ever could. The first step in learning how to control your brain is to understand one truthly: you are not your thoughts. This seems simple, even obvious. But when truly grasped, it becomes a turning point in your life. Most people believe they are thinking, when in reality, they are being thought. A thought arises, and before they even realize it, they are inside of it, believing it, reacting to it, obeying it. You break this illusion. A thought is nothing more than a mental impulse. It may carry memory, it may carry judgment, it may carry fear or desire, but it is not reality. It is a representation, a signal. Your mind offering you something based on what it has experienced before. That's all. Just because it is loud doesn't mean it is right. Just because it feels familiar doesn't mean it is true. The brain will offer you thousands of thoughts every day. If you believe all of them, you will live as a servant to a tool that was meant to serve you. So you begin by watching. The first discipline is observation without reaction. Sit down, close your eyes, and allow the thoughts to come. Do not resist them. Do not follow them. Simply observe. Like clouds passing through the sky, you'll notice patterns. Certain thoughts repeat. Certain judgments arise quickly. Certain fears return without invitation. These are not coincidences. These are mental habits. And that's what they are, habits, not truths. A thought that says, "I can't handle this," is not a prophecy, a reflection of an untrained pattern. But until you pause long enough to observe it, you will believe it. You will feel it. You will become it. You must create space between what arises in the mind and what you choose to do. Is the beginning of control. When you observe a thought and do not react, you weaken its power. When you do this repeatedly, the old pathways in the brain begin to lose strength. Your brain is plastic. It rewires based on what you pay attention to. When you stop feeding old thoughts with energy, they dissolve. When you respond instead with presence, new neural circuits are formed. This is not theory, it's structure. But the structure only shifts when your awareness becomes consistent. Now, most people make the mistake of trying to suppress thoughts. They want silence. They want immediate peace. That is not the way. The goal is not to stop thinking. The goal is to think consciously, to let thoughts come and go without giving them authority. You must think of your mind as a river. If you fall in, you are swept away. If you step back and observe from the bank, you can watch the flow without being caught in it. The more you practice this, the more you begin to see the nature of your mental chatter. Much of it is fear disguised as logic. Much of it is resistance masked as rationality. You begin to see how your brain protects you, not to empower you, but to keep you safe in the smallest version of yourself. It offers you comfort, familiarity, but never mastery. Mastery comes only when you begin to guide the mind, not follow it. So what do you do when a thought arises? First, pause, notice it, label it if necessary: fear, judgment, distraction, memory. Then ask, is this thought useful? Is it true? It bring clarity or confusion? And most importantly, does this thought deserve my attention right now? You don't fight it. You simply choose. That power, to choose your response rather than be driven by mental momentum, is the foundation of brain control. It is not achieved by force, but by repetition. Every time you observe instead of react, you train your nervous system. Every time you challenge an unhelpful thought, you reclaim mental territory. Eventually, a shift occurs. You no longer feel like the victim of your brain. You begin to feel like the driver. You can let thoughts pass. You can respond with intention. You can return to presence. And the thoughts that once controlled your day, the doubts, the comparisons, the impulses, begin to dissolve. Not because they are gone, but because they no longer lead. And that is real power. The mind will continue to offer you thoughts. But now you choose which ones become your reality. You are no longer a passive listener. You are a deliberate sculptor, shaping your internal world thought by thought, by breath. This is the first step in controlling your brain, learning not to obey every thought, but to meet it with calm awareness. To see it, but not become it. To hear it, but not believe it. To witness it, still act from clarity. Control begins with observation. And observation begins with stillness. From there, everything changes. Once you've learned to observe your thoughts without becoming them, next step in controlling your brain is learning how to give it direction. Because while awareness is the foundation, intention is the structure. Without it, the mind will drift. It will default to old patterns, repeating familiar scripts from the past. And those scripts, left unchallenged, become your future. So the second discipline is not just to observe your thoughts, but to command them. This does not mean forcing the mind into silence, nor does it mean repeating empty affirmations. It means understanding that the brain is a system, and like any system, it responds to instructions. Whatever you feed it consistently, it adapts to. If you feed it chaos, it becomes chaotic. If you feed it fear, it becomes defensive. But if you feed it structure, purpose, and clarity, it becomes your greatest ally. You train your brain by what you focus on, what you repeat, and what you tolerate. Thought you allow is an instruction. Each emotion you reinforce is a signal. Every day you're programming your mind, consciously or unconsciously. And once you realize this, you can no longer afford to be careless. You must speak to your brain as a leader speaks to their team, not with panic or weakness, but with calm clarity. You begin each day by setting the tone. Before the world has a chance to invade your mind, you plant your own thoughts. Not hopes, not reactions, but clear commands. What kind of energy do you want to carry? What kind of mindset must you hold? What kind of behavior will define you today? You do not wait for the mood to strike. You create it. Is the difference between living from reaction and living from design. The brain responds best to rhythm. So you build one. You create rituals, a breathing pattern in the morning, a mantra that roots you in presence, a habit of writing down the thoughts that serve your higher path. You begin repeating the thoughts you want to become automatic, not because they feel natural, but because they will become natural if you repeat them enough. At first, will feel awkward, unnatural, even false. But that is only because you are building new neural roads and the brain always prefers the well-worn path. It will resist. It will say, "Isn't you?" But that voice is not truth. It's just familiarity. You must keep building the new path anyway. And here's what makes this powerful. When you lead the mind with intention, you interrupt the old programs. You break the cycles of automatic anxiety. You stop rehearsing failure. You stop replaying the story that says you're not enough. You begin to train the mind to look for what is useful, not what is fearful. You guide it to focus on progress, not perfection. To stay grounded in presence, not scattered by distractions. Over time, the mind begins to follow. It begins to quiet down. It begins to trust your leadership. And the chaos that once controlled your day turns into silence, focus, precision. But even this takes vigilance. Because the mind is like a child, it will test your limits. It will revert when left unsupervised. That's why you must become consistent, not harsh, not obsessed, just steady. Every time the brain offers a thought, ask, does this serve me? Does this move me forward? Does this align with who I want to become? If not, you replace it, not with fantasy, but with command. I can't handle this becomes, I will handle this, step by step. This always happens to me, becomes, this time I choose to respond differently. I don't feel motivated, becomes, I don't need motivation. I need discipline. You are not pretending. You are redirecting. You are taking the mind from autopilot to manual control. And that is the beginning of inner mastery. Soon, the brain learns what matters. It stops fighting every challenge. It stops magnifying every doubt. It becomes more focused, more stable, more aligned. And you begin to walk through life with a mind that works for you, not against you. This is what few people understand. Your brain does not decide who you are. You decide, and then train your brain to follow. Not once, but every day. Your identity is not fixed. It is formed. Formed by the thoughts you repeat, the emotions you allow, the actions you take. So speak to your brain with clarity. Guide it with discipline. Train it through repetition. And soon, you will no longer feel like you're at war with yourself. You will feel like you've come home to yourself. Calm, clear, and in command. That is how you lead your mind. That is how you shift from reaction to intention. And that is the next step in controlling your brain. Once you've begun to observe your thoughts and guide your mental direction, the next step in truly controlling your brain is teaching it to act, regardless of how it feels. Because while awareness brings insight and intention brings clarity, it is only action that brings transformation. Without it, the mind stays in thought. It builds castles in the air. It imagines the future, relives the past, and creates endless what-ifs. But nothing in the real world changes. This is where many people stop. They learn to reflect. They learn to visualize. They even learn to speak to themselves with strength. But when it's time to move, when it's time to make the difficult call, speak the uncomfortable truth, sit down to do the work, suddenly the brain resists. It gives you reasons. It gives you feelings. It gives you perfect timing that never arrives. Here is what must be understood. Your brain is not programmed for fulfillment. It is programmed for safety. It doesn't care about growth. It cares about familiarity. It wants to avoid discomfort. It seeks the path of least resistance. So when you decide to move in a new direction, it will not immediately support you. It will resist. And this resistance is not a sign to stop. It is a sign to begin. You only act when you feel ready. You are not in control of your brain. Your brain is still in control of you. Because readiness, as most understand it, is an illusion. You are not meant to wait for perfect emotion. You are meant to teach your brain that emotion does not rule action. Discipline does. The question then becomes, how do you move when the mind is resisting? The answer is, you shrink the moment. You stop negotiating. You don't wait for the ideal mood. You create a rule. When it's time to move, you move. Not with anxiety, not with hesitation, but with presence, even if it's just one step. Because the moment you act, even in a small way, you interrupt the mental loop. You disrupt the internal story. You give the brain new data. And that is how rewiring begins. Your brain learns not from what you think, but from what you do consistently. The next time your brain says, I'm too tired, take the first step anyway. The next time it says, this doesn't matter, remind yourself of the consequence of delay. The next time it says, not now, reply, now is exactly when. This is not aggression. It is not force. It is discipline. Discipline does not mean ignoring the mind. It means leading it. You acknowledge the emotion, but you do not let it drive. You see the resistance. You do not obey it. You move. And you do it again tomorrow and the day after. With time, your brain learns. It begins to associate movement not with fear, but with forward energy. It begins to feel safe in progress. And slowly, the resistance fades. Not because it disappears entirely, but because it knows who's in charge. Most people never reach this point. They think the presence of resistance means something is wrong. But it doesn't. It means the training is working. You are confronting the edge of your current self. You are stepping into the unknown. And your brain, doing its job, tries to protect you from it. But you don't need protection. You need movement. And movement is what builds trust, not just with others, but with yourself. Each time you do what you said you would do, even when you didn't feel like it, you build internal confidence. Prove to your mind that you can be relied on, that your values, not your moods, lead your life. This is how you shift from a scattered, reactive state to a focused, disciplined one. And this is also where peace comes from. Not the kind of peace that comes from sitting still, but the kind that comes from knowing you are not trapped by your impulses. That your feelings do not dictate your future. That you can act in alignment with your clarity, regardless of your mental noise. This is the path of internal strength. And it's built through action, small, daily focused. So stop waiting for the mind to feel perfect. Start teaching it to follow your will. Shrink the step, move anyway, and let your actions become your teaching. Over time, your brain will begin to understand this person moves when it's time to move. This person does not delay. This person does not wait for motivation. This person leads when your behavior aligns with your identity. That is when your thoughts, your choices, and your results all begin to mirror each other. Because you didn't just think differently, You live differently. And now your brain follows, not out of fear, but out of respect. The final step in learning to control your brain is perhaps the most overlooked, yet the most powerful of all: repetition. Not the kind that comes from obsession or desperation, but the kind that is rooted in discipline, clarity, and trust. Because even after you have learned to observe your thoughts, direct your focus, take conscious action, none of it will last unless you return. Again and again. With consistency, with sincerity, with humility. This is where most people fail. Not because they are incapable, not because they are weak, because they confuse awareness with mastery. One moment of clarity and they believe they are changed. One good day of action and they assume the old patterns are gone. The brain is not changed by moments. It is changed by repetition. Your mind is not a switch to be flipped. It is a landscape to be cultivated. What you water grows. What you neglect fades. And so, you want lasting control over your brain, you must commit to daily training. Not dramatic, not loud, but quiet, steady, and non-negotiable. Repetition is what transforms insight into identity. Anyone can think clearly once. Anyone can act with discipline for a day. But only those who repeat the process, especially when it's difficult, create true change. You return to observation, not because you forgot how to observe, because the mind continues to move. New thoughts arise. Old fears return. Patterns you thought were gone resurface in subtle forms. And if you stop watching, they slip back in unnoticed. So you return, not as a beginner, as a practitioner. You understand that the work never ends, and that's exactly why it works. You return to focus. The mind left alone wanders. It seeks comfort, distraction, and stories. But you do not punish it. You guide it. Every day, you choose what to feed it. You choose your words, your inputs, your attention. You guard your mental environment not as a prisoner, but as a gardener, protecting the ground in which your future will grow. You return to action. You don't just act when it's convenient. You act even when no one is watching. You act when it's cold, when it's late, when you're tired, when the brain starts bargaining. And in those moments, when you still follow through, you remind the mind who leads. These moments become your strength, not the big wins, but the repeated decisions that most will never see. And finally, you return to the breath. This is your anchor, your reset. When your mind becomes clouded again, when emotions rise, when fear whispers old stories, you return to the breath. One inhale, one exhale. This is not weakness. This is recalibration. The discipline of coming back home to stillness before the noise decides your next move. Through repetition, your brain stops resisting. It stops questioning every decision. It stops creating false urgency. It begins to trust, not because you convinced it, but because you proved it, through daily action, through inner consistency, through the kind of discipline that needs no audience. And what arises is not just control, but peace. Not a shallow peace built on silence, but a deep peace built on structure. You no longer fear your emotions because you know they don't own you. You no longer fear your thoughts because you know how to watch them. You no longer fear discomfort because you've trained yourself to act through it. The mind becomes clean, calm, clear, and in that state, decisions are simpler, energy is higher, focus is deeper, and life begins to reflect the inner clarity you've cultivated. But this clarity must be maintained. Just like the body must be nourished, just like strength must be trained, the mind must be returned to. Every day, even if it's 5 minutes, even if it's only one moment of conscious thought, you return, not because you are weak, but because you are serious. Control is not found in perfection. It is found in persistence. You may fall, you may drift, you may get caught in old patterns again. But the difference now is that you know the way back, and you take it. That is mastery. Not in never falling, but in never forgetting how to stand. So you return, again and again. And over time, your brain is no longer your opponent. It becomes your partner. It moves with you. It supports you. It becomes sharp, responsive, and disciplined. Not because of a breakthrough, but because of repetition. Because you chose every single day to return to what matters, even when it was hard, even when no one else did. That is how you control your brain. And that is how your life begins to reflect the strength you've cultivated in silence. In the end, true strength of a person is not in how loud they speak, how fast they run, or how much they know. It is in how quietly and consistently they lead their own mind, in the space between thought and action, where emotion rises and discipline responds. It is in the space where most people give in, but a few choose to remain still, to remain rooted, and to remain committed to their path. Control your brain is not to dominate it by force. It is not to silence all doubt or destroy every weakness. It is to become the silent observer of its chaos without reacting. It is to listen without obeying. It is to lead it. Firmly, without violence, with clarity, not with noise, with presence, not with panic. You begin with observation. Because you cannot change what you do not see. You do not blame the mind for wandering, fearing, or resisting. You simply notice. And in that noticing, you break the illusion that you are your thoughts. You create space. And in that space, choice becomes possible. The moment you step back and see your own mind clearly, you have taken your first step toward control. Then you give it direction. The mind is a follower. It will follow whatever you feed it consistently. So you must feed it consciously. You create intention. You set the tone. You interrupt old patterns. You replace the thoughts that weaken you with thoughts that serve you. You don't wait for motivation. You create it. Not through force, but through design. You guide the brain until it learns to trust your leadership. But the real test comes in motion. Because thoughts mean little without action. You train your brain to obey your higher self by moving forward. Even when it resists, you teach it that emotion is not the commander. Discipline is. You stop negotiating with hesitation. You shrink the step. You move anyway. And through movement, your brain learns to follow your clarity instead of your comfort. Still, one of this will last without repetition. True control is not found in one powerful moment. It is found in returning. Day after day, breath after breath, you don't train once and stop. You come back. Not because you're broken, but because you are building. You come back to awareness. You come back to action. You come back to the breath. And through this quiet, persistent returning, your brain begins to understand that you are not going away. Is who you are now. You lead yourself. And that is the highest form of power. In a world of distraction, you are focused. In a world of reaction, you are still. In a world of doubt, you walk with clarity. In a world that wants comfort, you choose the hard path, not for pain, but for purpose. And when others ask you how you changed, what the secret was, you won't need to shout it, because the strength of your presence will answer for you. It wasn't magic. It wasn't motivation. It was awareness. Intention. Action. Repetition. It was showing up when you didn't feel like it. It was sitting still when the noise screamed. It was choosing clarity over chaos. And it was doing this not once, but every day. This is how you control your brain. This is how you free yourself. Not by overpowering your thoughts, by leading them. Not by waiting to feel ready, but by moving with purpose. Not by being perfect, but by being consistent. So return again and again. Observe. Act. Repeat. Not for the world, for yourself. The day you stop waiting to be in control and start training yourself to be in control is the day your life begins to follow your will, not your wounds. And that is the quiet power no one can give you and no one can take away.